Let me begin by saying that it's not lost on me that I'm not a familiar face to the Washington Press Corps. So I'm going to say a few words about myself, perhaps expand on some of the things that Mr. Nader addressed, and talk about what I would set as my priorities during this campaign. I was born in McAllen, Texas, which is in the southern part of Texas. I'm a graduate of Columbia College at Columbia University. I studied political theory and comparative literature, and I'm a graduate of the Stanford Law School. I served a decade as a public defender in San Francisco, and I have to say that it is an experience that very much has informed my politics, and I have seen firsthand over and over again the realities and the result of the income inequalities that we have in our society. I entered politics in 2000 by running for a post on the Board of Supervisors. I represented a district of 80,000 people. As Mr. Nader pointed out, the budget that the Board of Supervisors oversees is $6 billion now, larger than that of many states. And I was honored by my colleagues there and elected to be the president of the council, although I was the only Green Party member on that body. I think it's a testament to my integrity and my ability to work with politicians of differing political ideas. Some of you may know me from the mayor's race of 2003. I ran for mayor in San Francisco. When I entered that contest, I was told I could not win it, that I had no business being in that contest, and I started that race with perhaps 2 or 3% support. Ultimately, I won 47% of the vote. I was outspent, it's estimated, by about 8 to 1. And I think it is fair to say that I have been credited with raising important progressive values during that contest. It is an honor for me to run with Mr. Nader. I hold him in very high esteem, and I share his politics. Let me say that during this campaign, I would be interested in discussing really 3 broad areas that I think I can make a contribution in. The first is in the area of election reform. And I think it's very important that when we talk about presidential politics, that we simply acknowledge that our democracy is in crisis. Of the last 100 years, if you look at the presidential races, of the last 24 of them, a full third of those contests have been won by a candidate that did not have 50% of the vote. In San Francisco, I was committed to election reform and helped bring forward a measure that allowed for a majority outcome in a single trip to the ballot box, regardless of how many candidates were in the contest. And so, obviously, I will be talking about that during this race. That election reform measure, coincidentally, is used to elect the mayor of London, the president of Ireland, and in countless races in Australia. So it begs the question, why haven't we adopted it in a wider sense in the United States? The second area that I will be trying to emphasize during this campaign is poverty. There is a widening disparity between rich and poor. It is noteworthy that the United States has the highest inequality among income inequality among the 11 industrialized nations. The Justice Department has pointed out that there are over 2 million people in jails in this country. And while in San Francisco, I worked hard to affect issues related to income disparities, specifically working to raise the minimum wage, to create a minimum wage, but to also do something that hasn't been done in Congress, which is to put an indicator for the cost of living. That way it adjusts on its own if cost of living rises. And for that reason, that minimum wage has risen every year since it was implemented. I have also seen firsthand the positive benefits of that kind of reform and seen the impacts it has on individuals' lives and the positive health effects that it has on them. And of course, Mr. Nader and I are going to be talking about single-payer health care, which none of the other prominent candidates are addressing. The third area that I want to discuss, and I think Mr. Nader and I are committed to addressing is the war in Iraq and the continued occupation there. Although we met about a decade ago, Mr. Nader invited me to be on a tour of California, an anti-war tour in 2005. Let me say, I don't think either one of us thought that 3 years later we would still be urging for a withdrawal of American soldiers from Iraq. The National Priorities has estimated that the cost of the Iraq war on municipalities and states is tremendous. D.C. alone has lost $667 million that it otherwise might have had. California has lost nearly $20 billion, and New Mexico has lost $473 million. The lack of those resources means that those communities and states compete for scarce resources, and of course, that shouldn't be the case. We are also going to distinguish our position on the war in Iraq and the continued occupation from the two major candidates. Senator John McCain has in effect been calling for a perpetual war, permanent occupation. And while we appreciate his candor, Mr. Nader and I simply do not agree that that is the appropriate policy for the region. Likewise, the front-runner for the Democrats, Senator Barack Obama, when asked during this campaign at a televised debate whether or not he could commit to getting U.S. soldiers out of Iraq by January of 2013, he would not commit to doing that. As anti-war sentiment has been on the rise, he has indicated he would work to get combat troops out in 2009. But he says he would leave troops there to fight counterterrorism efforts and to strike at al-Qaeda. Those are his words. Well, the Center for American Progress has estimated that that's going to call for 60,000 troops to remain in Iraq. And Mr. Nader and I do not support that policy. Nor do we support Senator Obama's call for 100,000 more troops, and we do not support his call to redeploy troops being taken out of Iraq to Afghanistan. I have no illusions about what's happening here today. I understand what stands before us, but let me also say that I've never entered a political contest with the idea that it couldn't be won. And it's cynical to say that the American people are incapable of hearing the truth and casting a vote for someone that they believe in. My own experience in politics has indicated that you can have electoral victories you're not supposed to have. You can impact how the winner shapes public policy, and in some cases you can set public policy for the future. I'll give you an example. I was a candidate for district attorney in 1999 in San Francisco. I was urging a number of things, including abolition of the death penalty. No other candidate for the office supported that. 4 years later, every single candidate in the contest said they were against the death penalty. Although I lost the mayor's race, it's without a doubt that I impacted the winner's policies in many respects. And of course, when I ran for the Board of Supervisors, I won the contest and have demonstrated my commitment to implementing solutions to problems. There are those that are going to say that what we're doing is going to take votes from other candidates. Let me just emphasize this. There's nothing that we do that can force anybody to vote for us. But we very much want the opposite not to be true, that anybody that wants to vote for us should not be forced to vote for other candidates. If there is any candidate that fears what we're trying to do here, then I invite them to go out and earn the votes that would otherwise be cast for us. We are in a democracy. That's how it works. Candidates with different opinions put them forward and go compete for votes. Thank you.